members, students, welcome to the new school year webinar. It is always a pleasure and a privilege to spend time with parents, caregivers, community members, staff, and fellow CSWs. At this time, I would like to invite two students to do the land acknowledgement and the African libation statement, and they will be introducing themselves.
Hi, my name is Pirba, and I'm going to be doing the land acknowledgements. Nous reconnaissons que nous sommes accueillis sur le terre de Mississauga des Anishinaabe, de la Confédération Haudenosaunee et du Wendat. Nous voulons également reconnaître la pérennité de la présence des Premières Nations, des Métis et des Inuits. I would like to acknowledge that we are situated upon traditional territories. The territories include the Wendat, Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nations, and the Métis Nation. The treaty that was signed for this particular parcel of land is collectively referred to as the Toronto Purchase and applies to lands east of Brown's Line to Woodbine Avenue and north towards Newmarket. I also recognize the enduring presence of Indigenous people on this land.
And I'm going to be reading the African libation statement. Our mothers and fathers came here, lived, loved, and struggled, and built here. At this place, their love, lives, and labor rose like the sun and gave strength and meaning to the day. For them who have given so much, we give in return. On this same sod, we will sow our seeds and build and move in unity and strength. Here too, we will continue the struggle for liberation and a higher level of human life. May our eyes be like the eagle, our strength be like the elephant, and the boldness of our life be like the lion. And may we remember and honor our ancestors and the legacy they left for us, as long as the sun shines and the water flow. Nos mères et pères sont venus, ont vécu, ont aimé, ont souffert et ont construit ici. À cet endroit, leur amour, leur vie et leurs travaux ont grandi comme le soleil et ont donné de la force et raison d'être à leur journée. À ceux qui ont tant donné, nous désirons remettre. Sur cette même terre, nous planterons nos graines, construirons et nous dépasserons de l'unité et la force. Ici aussi, nous continuerons leur désir de libération et leur niveau supérieur de vie humaine. Que nos yeux soient comme ceux de l'aigle, notre force comme celle de l'éléphant, notre audace comme celle de lion, et souvenons notre et honorons nos ancêtres et le legacy qu'ils ont laissé pour nous. Aussi longtemps que le soleil brillera et que les cours eaux couleront.
Thank you so much, students. These wonderful students represent General Crera Public School. We are so thankful for your time and for just sharing with us your voice in the land acknowledgement and the African libation statement. As we come together this evening, families, we are so excited to have you with us. A little bit of housekeeping. Interpretation is available during each presentation. Please post your questions in the Q&A. Chat has been disabled. When the presenter has finished, they will go over the questions and answer them after they have been posted. Live transcription has been enabled. This session is being recorded. The recording will be posted on the PCEO YouTube channel, and PCEO stands for Parent Communication and Community Engagement Office. This link, the link to this will be posted in the chat. We welcome you this evening. We meet you where you are, and we value your input, your presence, and your concerns. And so this evening, we'd like you to leave knowing something that will provide support to you to navigate and advocate for your child that they will get the best possible education that they can achieve beyond their potential. At this time, I would like to introduce you to Margaret Horvath. Margaret is the Office Administrator in the Parent and Community Engagement Office. And before Margaret comes on, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome and introduce to you our fellow community and support workers. We have 24 community support workers in the Toronto District School Board, and we serve 150 model schools. At this time, CSWs, I would like you to turn your camera on and introduce yourselves.
Hello, everyone. Unfortunately, I'm having a bit of camera issues, but my name is Jocelyn Smith. I'm a CSW in LC3. I support Military Trail, Treadway Woodsworth, Woolburn Junior, Alexander Sterling, Grey Owl, Public School, GB Little, and Emily Carr. If I will put my information in the chat and it's on the screen, please never hesitate to reach out. Thank you.
At this time, I will do we have any more CSWs with us? Okay.
Sorry, we have the amazing Kadra in the chat, and she supports LC1.
We can promote her.
We can put her on so she can introduce herself, Jocelyn. Thank you so much.
Give us 1 second. People will just be 1 second.
We will be with you in 1 second as we introduce Kadra, another CSW that's on our team.
Okay, now I can speak. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Kadra Hussein. I'm a community support worker, Learning Center 1, and my schools are Cordella, Charles Iwabester, Melody, Killsdale, and also Hardwood. And I will leave my contact information. Then if you need, you can contact me. Thank you very much for hosting, Donna.
Thank you, Kadra, for joining us. At this time, I would like to pass it over to Margaret Horvath.
Hi there, thank you very much for joining us. I'm Margaret Horvath, and I'm going to talk to you a bit about interpretation and translation with the board. I'm the office administrator in the Parenting Community Engagement Office. So one of the things that's really important with interpretation and translation is before we go and offer interpretation or translation, we need to identify what the language needs are of our school community. Perhaps we have a school where the main population is Mandarin or Farsi or Ukrainian or Tamil. So what we have to decide is, how are these meetings or how are these engagement sessions going to be handled? Perhaps English is not the language that the meetings are being presented in. Perhaps the meetings are being conducted in Mandarin and English is actually being interpreted. I think this is something for us to really consider. And also, what are we doing about our parents and caregivers who are illiterate? Often we have memos that are being sent home to schools and sent home from schools to parents and caregivers, and they're expected to be able to understand what's on the paper, but sometimes they only know that where the X is where they have to sign. They have no idea what the information is that's on the form. So perhaps in these cases, we need to really step outside of the box and think about other avenues of communicating in the written form. Perhaps it's not actually a written form. One of the examples I have here is maybe it's a video that's on the school's website that's actually been interpreted so that they're reading subtitles in the video that's being posted. Or instead of videos, maybe the forms that are sent home have actually been translated. So a little while ago, last week, Michelle Monroe did an amazing presentation to school councils where she asked a question in the presentation. So this was Michelle's school council town hall, and we introduced a program called Thought Exchange. And one of the questions was in the Thought Exchange, what are some of your best ideas and how you can intentionally engage parents and caregivers more equitably this year? So you can see that in the table that's showing on the screen, that interpretation and translation was pretty high in the priorities of what the group of people thought. But in relation to that, we also have communication format, we have events, we have meeting formats, and all four of these topics are all about communicating with the parents and caregivers. And you can see that it rated really high, and parents and caregivers thought that it was a really important piece of the puzzle that perhaps we need to be doing a little bit better on. So when we drill down into the interpretation and translation bar on this graph, we can see that some of the thoughts that were given to us is, this is what a parent or caregiver suggested. We are going to try to break barriers by offering childcare, interpretation, and offer meetings at various times and hybrid meetings. Because one of the things that we found also is that some school councils got higher attendance because of Zoom. We have another one here where make translation more accessible, i.e. share a common threads of communication instead of councils spending funds and translating the same thing. So one of the things that I always recommend when you are asking to have things translated is try to keep it as generic as possible. For instance, don't put names on it, don't put dates on it. So if you're having a holiday celebration in December, you would say, ABC, please join us at ABC School for our holiday celebration. We'd love to have you there. All parents and caregivers are welcome. And then leave a line for the date. So the whole message is very generic. So from year after year, once you get it translated, and this is something, if it's a common translation, and that can be done from a central budget so that many different schools can use the same translation. We had many other thoughts here. Use interpretation options at meetings. So you can see that, you know, in this case, for instance, this was rated really, really high. So at meetings, parents and caregivers want to have interpretation. We need to communicate in the languages spoken in our school communities. So once again, interpretation. We need to have our meetings in the languages that are being the most common languages. Interpretation, providing info in multiple languages. So this is, let me just expand a little bit. So this is not just for parent-teacher interviews. This is for, let's say, holiday celebrations or school support team meetings, have interpreters there so that parents can really understand what's being said about their children. Just all different parent-teacher interviews, of course. We have many requests for that, but school council meetings, you can have interpreters there so we can have more in-depth conversations with parents who might not fully be understanding what's happening. So you can see there's many, many different comments that were made at that meeting about interpretation and translation. Translate. So one of the things I need to perhaps explain is interpretation is spoken, okay? So, and translation is written. So what's happening at the bottom of our screen right now is translation. What the people, our interpreters are doing, that's spoken. So that's one of the things to remember. Interpretation is spoken, translation is written. So here we can see people are commenting about translation. Translate some communications sent to parents in the most spoken languages of the school. So don't just send things home in English, send it home in multiple languages. Translate communications. So once again, these things are all things that are all very important points that our parents and caregivers were expressing at this meeting. So these are things for you to consider. So when we have to identify the needs, parents and caregivers or school councils can access interpreters or translators by reaching out to the principal or the office administrator. All of your admin, that would include, of course, vice principals. So principals, vice principals, and office administrator have access to internal TDSB interpreters as well as translators. And then what they can do is they can set up a request for you to have an interpreter or a translation done. Parent and Community Engagement Office allocates resources to support interpretation and translation services. Schools can access this resource for events, such as, if you want to advertise your holiday fun fair or anything like that. Not all translations are covered. If it's school-based and under 1,000 words, it'll be covered by a central budget. But if it's something that's not necessarily education related or to do with school council, some of these things might not be covered. So if you're unsure, definitely you can reach out to me. You can see that translation services is something that the principals, vice principals, and office administrators can access by going to the link that I have on the screen. So now I'm going to hand it off to Yolanda. Yolanda is with Professional Support Services, and she's going to be talking about well-being at the TDSB. Yolanda Julian is the manager of social work and attendance services for LC3. Do we have Yolanda in?
Yes.
Okay, let me give Yolanda co-host. Yolanda, do you have your own slides or do you want me to do slides for you?
If you could do slides for me, great.
Yep, I have it here. I've got your presentation here.
Perfect.
All right, so over to you, Yolanda.
I think, Donna, was there a slide about the introduction? Donna? No?
Yeah, I just did that a couple moments ago.
No, for somebody else.
Sorry?
Okay, I'll continue. It's okay. I'll continue.
Okay.
So, sorry, everybody. My name's Yolanda Julian. I'm the manager of social work and attendance services for Learning Center 3. That's the eastern part of the city, primarily Scarborough area. So I just wanted to kind of gauge where you're at, or have you gauge where you're at. Which picture do you think represents best how you're feeling right now? Are you kind of lost in the abyss and the clouds? Are you needing that mask right now? Are you perfectly zen? Do you feel like you're on a cliff pushing mountains? Or number 5, playing the piano with not looking, feet, hands, or walking that really scary looking tightrope? And sometimes in a day or in a moment or in a week, you can go through all of these different types of feelings, and it's okay. I think what's important is recognizing where you're at right now, and then figuring out what you need to move forward. Next slide, please. So when we think about the well-being of our kids, I think this is one of the best images that come to my mind. And that's, when there's storms, so our kids and what they're feeling and experiencing, our calm, co-regulation occurs. And I'm showing this slide because the previous one talked about, how we can go through different emotions. And, it's important to kind of figure out where you're at in that moment and what you need to do to help yourself regulate. And then when you're in that place of regulation, then you're able to help your kids. So when they're going through their own emotions, it's, us trying to figure out our calm to help them regulate. Next slide. So one of the things, for us to think about is how do we support our child at home, right? So when they're at school, they're the support and care of the school staff and the caring adults in the building. But when at home, what can you do? And this is taken from School Mental Health Ontario. And so the first thing they talk about is taking care of you. So if you remember that first slide with the mask, right? It's making sure you have your mask on, taking care of yourself, right? So when we're able to co-regulate and figure out what we need to help ourselves, and we're able to help our kids as well. Talking to your child about the return to school. What has it been like? You know, last year we started off a little bit bumpy with COVID and closures, and we ended the year on a much better note. And so what's it like being back at school this year? Do they have any concerns, any worries, fears? Are they excited? What are they looking forward to the most? So just talking to them about all the experiences and emotions that they're going through about their return to school, and you know, normalizing it with them. Paying attention to special transitions. So these transitions are periods like from kindergarten to grade 1. You know, that's a transition period, and a lot of kids have, you know, are they nervous, they're worried. What does that look like? Going from a, you know, a more kind of secured classroom to one of the, you know, the big kids school. Or transitions from junior public school to middle school to high school. What is that like for your children? And talking to them about that experience as well. And lastly, reintroduce familiar routines. I know now we're getting to the fall season, so kids that are in after school activities are starting to pick up again, and these things are familiar to our kids. So reintroducing these familiar routines, bedtimes, dinner times, waking up at a certain time to get to school. So just getting them back into the routine of things, and I know it does take some time, but hopefully after a month in, we're starting to, you know, get familiar with what we used to do. So as I said, I'm the manager of social work and attendance for Learning Center 3, and I'm part of what we call professional support services. And what we do is provide direct and indirect services to optimize the educational outcome for all students. So I'm part of a team, and this team includes child and youth workers, occupational therapists and physiotherapists, psychologists and psychology staff, social workers, attendance counselors, my team, and speech language pathologists. So when we think about social work specifically, who are the social workers? And I feel like this is important because a lot of times people have misunderstandings of what social work does, especially at a school. We are all master level social workers with at least 3 years of social work experience. We are required as part of the board to be registered with the College of Social Workers. We provide both social work and attendance counseling support, and I'll talk about what attendance counseling support looks like as well. And we follow the legislation of the Personal Health Information Protection Act. So what that means is your health information is held confidential. It's considered health information, and it's not shared with the school team unless we have your consent. So social work provides areas in key domains, or provides support in key domain areas. And those areas include mental health, school avoidance and attendance, personal adjustment issues, family adjustment issues, any crises that may come up, advocacy support, and referral to community resources. And we tend to operate within what we call a tiered system. So tiered 1 is considered good for all. So this is where we might provide workshops for parents, workshops for classes, going into a classroom and talking to all the students, any kind of consultation support, prevention programs. And this is where most students receive support from a school social worker. Where you're looking for more identified or targeted supports, this is tier 2. And this is where we provide group counseling, specific groups, you know, there's groups on social skills, on academic support, on just, you know, friendships, healthy relationships. We also offer parent groups or school support team meetings. And then the last tier is tier 3, and this is more of intensive supports. So this is where we provide more individual counseling, assessments, academic programming support, and crisis interventions. So attendance counseling, while social work support is optional, and we do require the consent of the student or the guardian for social work support, attendance counseling is one of the mandated roles of school social workers, and it's mandated by the Ontario government. At the elementary level, it is school social workers that actually perform the dual role of social work and attendance counselor. And what they try to do is to try to understand, address, and support any attendance related concerns The referrals tend to come to the attendance counselor or the school social worker from the teacher, from the principal, after there have been multiple attempts and different strategies implemented to support the student and family in improving the child's attendance. Again, consent is not required for attendance counseling support. At the secondary level, we have dedicated attendance counselors, and their role is very similar to that at the elementary level, where they are providing supports in addressing and helping the child return back to school. The difference, however, is that attendance is taken actually at the beginning of each class or period for all students. And students, this is part of the Learn to 18, where students are required to attend school until the age of 18. Now, we do recognize that some students, academic, for whatever reason, can be a challenge in the moment. And so there are different alternatives for some of our students. And one of them is a supervised alternative learning plan. And that's where we look at, for students 14 to 17 years of age, what other options, in addition to academic, can we explore to help the students just kind of re-engage with learning and become involved in their community. So it can include employment training, part-time attending school while doing something else, counseling, or just accessing community programs. So when to consider accessing supports. If you or your child is noticing that there's feelings of, for example, anxiety are becoming more intense or more frequent, then that's the time to think about our supports. Can supports be helpful at this point in time? If the feelings seem to be lasting for a long period of time, like we know there's some anxiety with returning back to school, that's normal and natural, that's how we cope. But if it seems to be lingering for a lot longer than a month or 2 months, then that's the time to consider accessing supports. If the worry, concern, or whatever you're feeling is interrupting with the one's daily activities and well-being, they're not able to wake up, avoiding staying at home, then that's a time to think about accessing supports. And lastly, when the level of distress is so intense that it's really hard to manage and cope with on your own. So at TDSB, how do you access supports? So if you have concerns about your child, then you would connect with the teacher, the school administrator, like the principal or vice principal, and just talk to them about the thoughts of connecting with the school social worker. Every school has a social worker attached to the school. They are not there every day of the week, but they will be available, and they have designated days that they're at the school. Referrals are typically made through SST meetings or your school support team, because it's a conversation of, what strategies have been implemented to support the child, and is social work the best fit or could be helpful at this point in time. We also have on the TDSB website a list of many culturally responsive and relevant resources. And so this is actually a screenshot of what the page looks like. So if you go to the TDSB website and you type in relevant resources or culturally responsive, this page will come up and you'll be able to click on the tab and select, what type of supports are you looking for? So if you're looking for example, something from the Muslim community, agencies will pop up that can support you. And as well, in addition to supports at the TDSB, there's plenty of supports in the community as well. So I just have two here on the screen right now, mental health TO, as well as Kids Help Phone, which are ones that we often encourage our young people to reach out to, or we encourage families to share with young persons when they need any kind of supports. And some other agencies. Again, I'm in Scarborough, so Strides Toronto is a Scarborough-based agency that we turn to quite often, and we encourage our families to reach out to a lot. Children's Mental Health Ontario, and then mental health, some mental health links as well through Sick Kids. So next we have Carlo Cabrera. He is essentially assigned principal of equity, anti-oppression, and school improvement.
Yolanda, before we bring Carlo on, we actually had a question in the chat for you.
Okay.
How can we increase awareness among teachers about ADHD in students so they can support them better? Is that something you can answer, or is that something for Carlo?
It could be for both. I think
Okay.
in terms of increasing teachers' awareness, it's just bringing it up with the teachers, right? So if you're having that conversation with the teacher so that they, if you want to highlight an issue or something that you're seeing is lacking or could be improved, is bringing that to the teacher. Teachers do receive a lot of professional development in so many different areas, but I can't say, specifically which ones. But if the teacher doesn't have that knowledge, there are supports within the system that they can access to get that.
Awesome. Thank you. Carlo, do you have anything to add to Yolanda? Because she felt that you might also be a good contributor to this question.
I agree with Yolanda's response that communication with the school is going to be helpful. Communicating with your school principals, any questions you may have is going to be helpful, and you and the principal, you and the classroom teacher can have this in-depth dialogue, particularly about what you feel as the child's first teacher are your child's strengths. What you see from your from the many years you've been with your child, what are those things that they are passionate about, their interest, their curiosity, and sharing these with your school principal and with your child's teacher allows for the adults in the building to better understand how they're able to engage your child at school. And so that would be a step that I would advise my own sister-in-law who has a child in TDSB that any of the questions and concerns they may have, they are able to bring within the Toronto District School Board, as Ms. Julian has said. There are members of the special education department who can help in helping families, helping staff, helping the whole school understand what ADHD means, and what are some of those accommodations that can be provided for students who are identified as having with ADHD, and what are those things that classroom teachers can do that can really help students attend to what they are learning and learning in school.
Okay, perfect. We actually have one more question submitted in with this one. It is, and I'm not sure whether you want to take it, Carlo or Yolanda. How can we get parental controls for TDSB issued laptops to ensure students don't waste too much time on apps and websites that are not school related?
I'll take that, Ms. Julian, if it's okay.
Sure.
So I'm thinking that the family member who had asked this question is probably a parent of a grade 5 or a grade 6 student. And the reason why I'm thinking that, please correct me if I'm wrong. The reason why I'm thinking that is because in the Toronto District School Board, starting last school year, 21-22, all the students in grade 5 received a Chromebook that they have until they reach grade 8 or grade 9. Please don't quote me on that, but at least grade 8 or grade 9. And the idea behind the Chromebook is that students will have this piece of technology with them throughout their grades 5, grade 6, grade 7, grade 8, grade 9 year, so that they're able to access any of the online resources that are available. Last year, when I was a principal in one of our schools, we did have a parent who asked me a similar question. Now, TDSB computers are already, in some ways, locked security-wise, and what is accessible. Now, when TDSB computers go home, they are no longer connected to the TDSB Wi-Fi system that sort of limits some of those pieces. And one of the things that the family member and I at my former school were able to get to and think about is look at how their Wi-Fi programs, if one exists at home, is able to limit some of the parent controls that they may have. So that is something that particular parent tried, and that parent never came back to ask another question. So I'm hoping it worked. So most Wi-Fi access do have parent controls at home that can limit where a computer is directed to, how much time the Wi-Fi is open, and so on and so forth. And so that may be a particular possibility.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Carlo. This is Donna, and I'm going to answer the question. My child is in high school. Will the principal have time to meet with me to discuss previous issues with another student? They definitely will. And more details for that answer will be coming up when Michelle Monroe presents parent concern protocol. So please do not leave. But if you have to, the answer is yes, they will meet with you. But the protocol is first the teacher you meet with, that the children are in the class, but in high school, they're in different classes, but the answer is still yes, the principal will be happy to meet with you. And Margaret is going to answer the question about my daughter is 19.
Sorry, Margaret, before you start that one, could you please address, there was a question in the chat when you were talking about interpretation and translation. Can you touch interpretation and translation for parent councils and cost attached to that?
Okay. Interpretation for, it depends what it's for, but school councils can reach out to their principals and they can get interpretation and translation for their school councils. That is not an issue. And it's very, very easy to do. Just reach out to your principals and they'll be able to organize it for you. Okay. Carlo, before we get to you, there's one question in here that I will actually be able to answer. My daughter is 19. She has learning disability, dyslexia. How could you advise me to help her to apply for university college to be having accommodations to help her overcome her disabilities? I can let you know with the Parent and Community Engagement Conference that's coming up on October 22nd and 23rd, there is a specific workshop that is planned around this very topic, and you will be able to get all of your answers from there. We have somebody from guidance who's going to be coming in and speaking explicitly to this question. So we are going to be having registration open very shortly for the Parent and Community Parent and Caregiver Conference. So watch for that. It should be coming next week. And when it opens up, you'll be able to indicate that you want to register for that particular topic.
That's an important question, Yolanda.
Yeah. Okay. What else did we? Yolanda, we have another one in the Q&A for you if you'd like to answer it before we move on. What activities does TDSB advise teacher have for improving children's mental health? Are these activities mandatory or optional?
I don't think any.
TDSB advised, yeah.
So I don't know if what teachers specifically are giving for kids' mental health, but I'm hoping they're talking to kids about mental health quite regularly. It might not be the exact words mental health. We use the word well-being. How are you doing? How are you feeling? I can tell you that teachers and principals are encouraging kids to talk to somebody at the school who they feel connected to about whatever they're going through. So if they want to talk to somebody, ensuring that they have someone that they can talk to. Often it's the teacher, if not, it's a principal. It could be a child and youth worker, it could be the social worker. So I don't know what's specific in the class, but I can tell you generally people are talking about mental health, and we are encouraging kids to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Yolanda. So we're going to turn it over to you to do what you had started to do for Carlo. Or do you want me to introduce Carlo? I can introduce Carlo. So next we have Carlo Cabrera, who we've already heard amazing things from. Carlo is the centrally assigned principal for equity, anti-oppression, and school improvement. And he's going to be talking to us about supporting learning and recovery, inclusive education supports and services, and the school improvement process, otherwise known as SIP.
Good evening, everybody. And in the tongues of both of my grandmothers who are Filipino, I greet you magandang gabi, which is good evening in the language of the Philippines, which is Tagalog. My name is Carlo Corbero, as has been shared. My role in the Toronto District School Board is a centrally assigned principal for LC3, which is the same location as Ms. Julian. And LC3 is typically looked at as a large portion of Scarborough, except for the northwestern portion towards Pharmacy, Shepherd area. That's no longer part of LC3. For a large portion of LC3 is Scarborough. My role in the Toronto District School Board is supporting principals, supporting schools, and supporting learning coaches in helping schools improve their processes, improve their teaching, improve their approach to learning at school, which is really what school improvement is. And my role specifically touches on working with school principals and school teachers around these many different topics. I have also the great opportunity of linking and working with our community support workers and thinking about how we're able to help schools meet their goals of academic improvement for all students. The next slide that I'm going to share with you outlines what the TDSB's two biggest priorities are for this school year. Some of you may remember in the last school year, the Toronto District School Board sent out an electronic survey to families and to students, asking them quite a bit of numbers of questions about their perceptions about school, their perceptions about their children's readiness for school, their perception about their biggest concerns, your perceptions, pardon me, about your biggest concerns as the school year ends, as the school year begins. The similar type of questions were asked of students as well. When all of these questions and answers were collated, it was found that we have a large number of students who are worried, who are experiencing stress and anxiety, and who are afraid of returning back into school, whether it be in person or virtual. And we also had the opportunity to listen to teachers report back their students' academic outcomes. And the Toronto District School Board has taken all of these different data sets and identified common themes from them. And these common themes were all collated and brought together into these two priorities. And so this school year, the Toronto District School Board, your school's principals and vice principals, your school's teachers, custodians, office administrators, community support workers, coaches, all of us in the Toronto District School Board are all focused on these two: fostering joy and a sense of belonging in our classroom as a foundation for academic achievement, and two, reducing disproportionate outcomes. Now let's talk about the first. The whole idea of joy and a sense of belonging. Let's think even for ourselves. If we are in a place that brings us joy, if we are in a place that is identity affirming, where we feel that we are part of this room, this community, where we are in a space where our languages are spoken and celebrated, our entire identity is celebrated, chances are we're going to want to be there in that space. We're going to want to stay in that space. And so our first priority is asking our schools to think about how we, as an entire system, create schools where students find joy, where students feel themselves part of the school community. Because if they do, they're going to want to come back tomorrow. And that is the base of our work around curriculum. And so schools are working in a variety of different ways to support this priority. It was reported earlier today in one of the chats I saw around extracurricular or co-curricular activities as something that has returned to schools this school year. And I know that I was in a school today, and many of the students that we spoke to were talking about one of the things that they love about this school year is that they're able to engage in sports outside again. And is a perfect example of how fostering that joy, wanting to be there, is something that is happening in our schools. We had a grade 1 student today share with us when we asked the grade 1 student, "What do you think of math?" And the grade 1 student said, "I feel nervous about math." And so we asked the grade 1 student, "Why?" And the student was able to list things. "I don't know how to count. I don't know my numbers." And these kinds of questions that our teachers are engaging with, or these types of listening opportunities where we really try to understand what students are thinking, is allowing us as teachers, as principals, to really understand how best we can create the school environment where the grade 1 student does not need to feel nervous about math, because math is fun. That math and the math instruction can be engaging and exciting, that they're engaged in play, but all the while they're playing, they're actually learning the math. And so it's so important for us as schools to foster that sense of joy, that sense of belonging, because again, and it's so enshrined in my head, if the students want to be in that space, they're going to want to come tomorrow. And that's the name of the game. Because if they want to come, then we're able to continue with all the different fun and challenging and rigorous activities that we can do to help them develop the skills that they need within their particular grade. The second priority that the school board has is reducing disproportionate outcomes. And what does that actually mean, disproportionate outcomes? And of course, in the middle of my presentation, my mouse from my computer stops working. It's back again. Disproportionate outcomes talks about a condition where a percentage of students in this particular case sorry, my computer screen is acting up right now, and it's saying that I have internet issues. If I disappear, I will come back. When we talk about disproportionate academic outcomes, it talks about disproportionality of the percentage of students of a particular identity and the outcomes they have academically, that it differs from the percentage of the whole group. And in the Toronto District School Board, we see students who have unfinished learning, whose learning was interrupted due to the pandemic, and whose learning systemically, with some of the structures that we have in schools, are being underserved, are not exactly where they need to be. And so part of the work of the Toronto District School Board and of schools right now is really trying to understand who are the students who are being underserved in our school? Who are the students who are experiencing challenges in our schools? And then critically thinking, what are we going to do as a school to help the students who are struggling, who may need some more support? And everything that I've just shared with you right now is under the term school improvement process. Next slide, please. And the school improvement process is all about how schools identify a need or a gap, setting the goals to say, you know what, we need to remedy this gap. We need to fill this gap. We need to change this in our school in order to, pardon me, I'm just turning my phone down, in order to develop a plan in the school of how to remedy and change this gap. And then over time, implement those particular plans and then continue to reflect and adjust. This is what school improvement is, right? We are looking at our students and what our students are telling us verbally, what our students are telling us through their work, and then looking at what the students are sharing with us about their work and listening to them, and then trying to understand where are those most urgent need, and then really working hard with teachers, with community support workers, with professional support services to be able to create an environment, a structure to be able to help the students. The last piece there, reflect and adjust, is crucial. As a school principal, I need to ask myself, are all of the interventions that we are putting in place, is it making a difference in the children's ability to read? If that was one of our goals. Are all the things that we put in place, is it making a difference in how the children are understanding the math? Because if it is, then great. Let's continue on. Let's even try to better understand how we can excel further. If our action plans are not meeting the desired goal, then we need to think critically about, are we doing the right things? Do we need to change some of our action plans? Because at the end of the day, the goal is the school's improvement and the improvement of our students', your children's achievement. And that's what school improvement plan is. It's not just a one-time September, October thing, but rather it's an ongoing thing, an ongoing dialogue between the home, between the students, between the school, between the community, all thinking about how can we focus our efforts, all of our efforts together to improve student achievement. And that's what school improvement planning is. Next slide, please. And so it is so crucial. It is so crucial for students and parents and caregivers and guardians to be part of the school improvement planning process. Why? Because parents, guardians, and caregivers are our students' first teachers. You know your children best. You know their passions. You hear their needs. You hear what they're excited about. You hear what they want to see. You hear the questions they have at home. You hear the questions they have about a concept they learned in class. And engaging in that dialogue, continually speaking with your children's teachers, your children's principals, and vice principals, allows for that constant home to school and school to home and community dialogue that is so integral and important in the school improvement plan process. And so I encourage you tomorrow, connect with your child's teacher, connect with your child's principal and say, you know what? I think one of the areas where we might need to focus on in the school is how we help kindergartens learn to read. You may say, you know, one of the things that we can do to help our children's reading abilities is to have more library time at schools, that they can borrow books and read at home. All of these ideas are so important for schools to be able to, again, create that environment that is so focused on student achievement. And so I encourage all of us present to engage in and participate in that dialogue with your schools about what you're hearing at home or what you're sensing. And sometimes it may not always need to be an idea that you wish to bring forward. A simple question is so powerful for school principals and schools to be able to think about, what are we doing to support this particular area? Or what are we doing to be able to provide supports for students who may be facing challenges in this particular area? And all of that is school improvement. It is not just a one moment thing, one moment event. It is a continuous event year after year after year. And obviously, the staff in the community play an important role in thinking about, again, what are those gaps? What are the goals that we wish to achieve? What are those action plans that we're going to do in the school to support student achievement, to support parent engagement and participation and partnership, and to support communities, all hyper-focusing on that one piece, which is student achievement. And I encourage you to have those conversations with your schools. This November 2002, families, parents, guardians, and caregivers of children from kindergarten to grade 3 and students from grades 4 to 12 are going to have an opportunity to engage in the student census. And a student census will give the parents and families and guardians an opportunity to answer questions about themselves and answer questions about their perceptions about school, curriculum, safety, activities. There are quite a number of questions in them. And students will be asked a similar type of questions from grades 4 to 12. And these census data, or the information that we will get from these census data, will help the school board begin to think about what are those programs, what are those structures they need to put in place so that, again, all students, families, parents, guardians, caregivers throughout the TDSB experience joy and belonging, and that our interventions in the classroom are focused on reducing disproportionate outcomes and ensuring that all students have what they need to be able to succeed academically to their potential. And so I encourage you to read any of the documentations or speak with the school about any of the documentations, letters that will come home about the parent census. Again, it happens in November. And Ms. Horvath can speak to the fact that our parent census are also translated into different languages, and the PCEO was definitely engaged in that as well. Next slide, please. So how do schools improve? And this will be very quick. The Toronto District School Board is asking schools to look at these 4 things, these 4 foci when they're thinking about what are you going to do to improve schools. Obviously, 1, achievement. 2, belonging and joy. And that has a lot to do with our 2 school board priorities. The third is equity, all talking about what are we, if equity is defined, if we describe and define equity as providing for the student what they need to succeed, what exactly are we doing in schools to give students who are experiencing challenges in math and language or in other areas, develop the skills, develop the feeling that they can excel. And that's part of a school improvement. And the last goal for all schools is to increase a greater awareness about Indigenous education and sovereignty. And that's how schools are going to be improving, working to improve their buildings, their facilities, their teaching this school year. And again, families, parents, and guardians, caregivers play an important role in how schools develop these goals and action plans. Next slide, please. And I thank Ms. Julian for leading us into thinking about how do we support students in the Toronto District School Board. Last spring or last school year, the Toronto District School Board unveiled a student learning strategy focused on combating hate and racism. And the logo to the right of the screen looks at what those strategies are. in the Toronto District School Board, combating hate and racism is a serious task. It is a task in which all of us who are employed, who are working within the Toronto District School Board, are tasked to really focus our efforts. And to really look at how are we engaging student leadership? How are we using the tools that are available to us to take action about racism and hate? And also, how do we engage in partnerships for learning with community? Because community is able to inform us. What are the issues at play? What are the issues the communities are facing, and how are we able to work within the schools, work within our classrooms to combat hate and racism? And obviously, the caregiver engagement and the learning is crucial in order for us to be able to build that symbiotic relationship of challenging racism and hate. And of course, for me as a former classroom teacher, what are those strategies? What are those pieces that we can use in the classrooms to hyper-focus on challenging and combating hate and racism? From being able to use picture books to draw out and really get to some of the ideas about hate and racism and the relationship we have with each other, to using guest speakers, to using great prompts for writing, to really engage our staff and the students in thinking about taking action to combat hate and racism. And of course, as Ms. Julian pointed out, supporting students' diverse needs in social, emotionally, and academics is part of how we are able to support students this school year, particularly around a school improvement planning process. And our social workers, our speech and language pathologists, our school psychologists, our child and youth workers, our child and youth counselors, and our student equity program advisors, and our community support workers, again, all work together to support students, to support schools in creating those structures that we are able to help students. And we are continually learning along the way. How? Because the needs of students differ in one school to another, in one area of the city to another, in one classroom to another, and being responsive to students are critical. Next slide, please. Again, I bring a focus of instruction, being a principal, being a former classroom teachers, and teachers have great impact on student achievement and student learning. And so our work in helping our school teachers, helping our educational assistants learn from their students about what they need to succeed is crucial. And so in the Toronto District School Board, throughout the entire city, there have been number of teachers who have been released from their schools in order to support schools, like reading coaches, equity coaches, graduation coaches, literacy intervention teachers, and though not necessarily Ontario College of Teachers, but community support workers, because they too are in classrooms helping students read, helping students engage with texts. And so the focus of our team is really to help schools in identifying their need, and then using our collective experiences over the years to really help schools focus on learning teaching strategies and creating, again, those structures to help students find a sense of belonging and joy. Because if they want to be there, then they're going to come back the next day. Then we're going to be there with effective and high yield teaching strategies, the best teaching strategies that we are able to learn from those around us and use them to help students achieve. And so at this time, Ms. Horvath, are there any questions that I may be able to answer?
Thank you so much, Carlo. There is one question.
Cardozo. Yes.
What is the frequency of the reflect/ adjust stage in the school improvement planning?
That's an excellent question. I will share with you as a school principal that adjust and reflect happens all the time. If when a school is focused on school improvement, that reflect, adjust piece happens almost every single day in thinking about what the school is. Of course, there are specific timeframes where even a superintendent will be coming in with their school principals and reflecting on the school's journey. And I know there's one or two superintendents joining us tonight, and they may be able to speak on that piece. But part of the work in thinking about are we on the right track is, in a way, systematically. There are times when superintendents speak with principals, but theoretically, it happens daily. When I meet with teachers with grade teams, we begin to look at what data is, what evidence do we have that students are moving forward. That is a moment to reflect and or adjust. When we meet with families, parents, and guardians in a school support team supporting students with special education, that is a moment to reflect and adjust. For me, there are three poignant moments, if I may, as a school principal, where it is a critical reflect, adjust moment is prior to report cards, when teachers, when the release of the report cards, when teachers are talking to me, engaging with me about the evaluation process. Evaluation is that moment where a teacher takes all the work and takes all the evidence and then is able to say all of these using the achievement chart in the curriculum is an A, a B, or a C, or a D. And those moments are pure moments to pause and reflect. But when we're thinking about school improvement planning process, it needs to happen before. And that's why I meant that it happens almost daily.
Thank you, Carlo. And I would just like to take a moment to thank parents and caregivers for these wonderful questions. We are all learning and sharing together, and that's what it's all about. There's another question here, and I don't know who's going to take this, Yolanda or Carlo. Combating hate and racism in schools is important, especially as it relates to the mental health issues it creates for our children in and out of the school environment. What metric is used to measure the effectiveness of the strategies used to minimize hate/racism in schools and to support affected students?
So I can't speak to specific metrics. I think we have a robust research department at TDSB. And I know that we do collect data, and they use that data to determine, what's happening, looking for trends, using that data to explore any interventions that are out there, and what is the effectiveness, what is the validity of these instruments. And then they connect with the support staff and teaching staff to decide how it will be used in our schools. Whenever there is an incident in a school, the principals have to document that and keep track of what's happening in their schools. And in consultation with superintendents and with teaching staff, then they determine what makes sense as the best step moving forward for their individual school. So there's different levels of data collection happening, but I can't speak to specifically what is used in terms of what metric system, but I do know at the school level, at a system level, and even support staff and the stats that we collect, especially in social work, we collect data in terms of how often we're responding to incidents of hate, racism, and bias in terms of providing supports to kids as a result. So there's different levels of data being collected and used all for the purpose of intervention, early intervention, prevention, and supporting our kids and staff.
Thank you so much, Yolanda. And at this time, I'll pass it over to Carlo.
Thank you so much. And at this time, I'd like to introduce and welcome Miss Michelle Monroe from the Parent Community and Engagement Office. Miss Monroe.
Good evening. I trust that everyone is doing well and your evening has been wonderful so far. I wonder, before I get started, if I could please get the opportunity to share my slide. But before I get started, is the chat open? May I ask? Donna, Carlo, is the chat open?
It's closed. It's Q&A.
So can I ask the parents a question? Would that be all right if I start with a question that they could put in the Q&A?
Yes, please do.
So parents and caregivers, I'm wondering, just drop in the Q&A for us. Just tell us whether you found this session so far helpful and informative, and if you're learning a lot. So if you're learning a lot, just say learned a lot. And I'm going to give you 3 seconds to do that now. So begin now. Dawn, I'd love for you to tell me what you're seeing.
Yes, learned a lot. Very, very helpful and informative. Learned a lot, learned a lot. Learned a lot, learned a lot, learned a lot, learned a lot so far. Informative, helpful. My child just started with TDSB and JK. Learned a lot. Informative, informative, informative. Learned a lot. Thanks for asking, Miss Monroe. Very helpful. Learned a lot. Very informative and learned a lot.
All right. I am so glad to hear. So what that means is that I'm going to be keeping you for just a few more minutes, and you're going to be willing to stay with me for a few more minutes while I shift the gear for a few minutes to begin to talk about parents and caregiver engagement in our system. And I'll try not to be long because I'm recognizing it's 7:45. How much time do I have, Donna?
Let's say 15 minutes.
You know, when I'm invited to these events and I'm giving 15 minutes to share such incredible wisdom, I always wonder, how am I going to get through all the things I wish to share with you in that time? But my colleagues have done it so well, so I'm going to respect your time and try to do the same. Donna, just give me thumbs up that you can see my screen. All right.
Michelle, can I just interrupt for a second? You're not in presenter mode. We can see your next slide.
Oh, can you?
Yeah.
Are we now in full?
There we go. Perfect.
Okay, fabulous. So I'm going to ask parents for caregivers on the lines, guardians for a few seconds. I want you to imagine if there was one thing that you could change in education, what would that be? I just want you to reflect on that a moment. If there was one thing that you could change in the Toronto District School Board and you had the power to do it, what would that be? What would that one thing be? What would you do? And while you're thinking of that, I want to share this quote with you. And I always share this because this is one of my favorite quotes ever. And it reads, in any situation, you have the right, the power, and the ability to not only choose your experience, but also decide whether you're going to be a voice or an echo. And the favorite part of this quote for me is the last part, that as parents, caregivers, and guardians in our system, in the Toronto District School Board, you actually have the power to decide whether you're going to be a voice in our system or whether you're going to be an echo. I'm going to say that again. As a parent and caregiver guardian in TDSB, whether it be at your local school, whether it be on an advisory committee in our board, whether it be at a trustee ward meeting, You have the power to decide whether you are going to be a voice in our system or whether you're just going to be an echo in our system. So here's my other favorite quote in the world. So I want to begin my quick conversation with you this evening to say, you know what? If there is something in our system, or if there's something you don't like, then get to work in changing it. And if you can't change it, then let's change your attitude about it. So I started asking you if there was something in our system that you want to change, what would you do? And so I'm leaving this quote to you that if there's something you don't like, get to changing it. And if you can't change it, what about our attitude can we actually shift about it? So what does that mean for you? I'm going to talk about these 3 key things this evening. And I'm going to move through them quickly because Donna only gave me 15 minutes. But I'm always here, and you can always reach out and connect if there's any area that I cover that you want me to elaborate a bit about. I want to talk about how policy and procedure in the Toronto District School Board can actually give parents the power to shift and change things and to engage and navigate in the system. I want to give you some information about the rights that you have as parents and caregivers in our education system, particularly TDSB. I also want to talk about the responsibilities that you have, but I also want to share some opportunities that I know some of you are already exploring or introduce to some of the opportunities that are in our system that I want you to explore. So the first thing I want to present to you is the policy. And many of you may not know that our district has a policy called the Parent and Caregiver Engagement Policy. It's a brand new policy. We've always had one, but this one was just recently approved by our Board of Trustees in May of last year. And I want to bring it to your attention because I want you as parents and caregivers to have this policy with you. It is an exciting policy. The language in it, I think, is language that you're going to like. And that is because it's language that we got when we consulted parents, and we try to honor what we heard from parents and caregivers as much as we could in the policy. So the objective of the parent engagement policy is really to just tell parents and caregivers in our system about what the responsibilities are that we share in parent caregiver engagement, but also that we share in ensuring that all the students in our system are actually doing the best they can, getting the best care and nurture and supports they can to be able to effectively be successful within our district. So the objective of that is to really just outline for all of the stakeholders, for parents, for leadership, for schools, and our board and central staff, what is our responsibility around ensuring that parents and caregivers have the opportunity to do what they need to do to support the nurturing of their children in our system. You know, one of the second statements in our policy speaks about very clearly our language, about ensuring that all parents, particularly our racialized parents, our Black parents, our Indigenous parents, our people with disabilities, our two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer parents, we want to be sure that every parent and caregiver in our district, regardless of how they identify, are acknowledged, valued, and seen in our system. And so the policy speaks clearly to that. This is the language that's in our policy. And I want to be sure that you're aware of what that is, so that every parent in our system knows that there's a place of welcoming and belonging for you, not just in the policy, but in every aspect and part of our board. And I also wanted to share this last statement with you because it reads that the board will ensure that parent, guardian, caregiver engagement is a partnership that is equitable and relational, in which goals that support student achievement, well-being, and healthy development at home and school and in the community is done with parents. Not informed to parents, not told to parents, that are developed and designed together with parents. And this is the shift in the movement of our district as we look at the ways in which we need to grow parent and caregiver engagement and provide spaces for parents and caregivers, not just as informants who we tell things to, but as partners and collaborators in the work of engaging and supporting our students. I also want to talk about the parent concern protocol. And I want to make sure that every parent, and I just forward this because this is really not the parent concern protocol, but this is the way in which our communications has designed it in a way that will help parents understand how to move throughout our system and to give you a sense of what do I do as a parent and caregiver if I'm having a concern in our system? How do I get it addressed? And it outlines 4 quick steps. And the first one just really talks about, if you're having a concerns in the classroom, then it should go to the teacher, directly to the teacher, whatever way you communicate, whether you're calling to speak to the teacher, whether you're emailing the teacher directly, whether you have to go to the school to meet with the teacher, you have the right to be able to go in, speak to the teacher about that concern. The second step is your principal. You've gone to your teacher, you're not getting what you need, then you go to the principal to say, I've reached out to the teacher, I've not heard, or what I've heard has not responded to the issues that I've raised. Then you have the right to go to your school principal and ask for support, seek clarification, get guidance on a variety of different things. If that's not working, then your superintendent is also there to provide you that support, and your trustees are always there. They're always there. You are the one who elect your trustees. As you know, October 24th is elections in our city, and trustees will be on your ballot. So you'll know that they are there to represent you and speak for you at the Board of Trustees. And so this is a protocol that's been outlined for parents in terms of if I have to speak, or I have to express, or I have a thought, or I have a need. This is the 4 ways in which you can move in getting that issue or question or need addressed. So I want to shift a bit now, because very rarely do we talk about the rights of education or the rights of parents and caregiver in education. So I want to take a few minutes just to stay there to speak to that briefly, because I don't think we talk about it enough. And on the right-hand side, I want you to know that education is a right, not a privilege. And in this country, there's just about in every, whether you look in the Ontario Human Rights Code, whether you look in the Ontario Education Act, whether you step outside of Ontario and look in the United Nations Declarations of the Rights of Indigenous People, whether you're looking at Article 26 of the Universal Declaration of the Human Rights, education is spoke of a right for every child, not a privilege, but a right for every child. And I want to encourage parents and caregivers that the lens you have on education is that your child has the right to have the best education possible every time they step foot in the Toronto District School Board, right? And I also want you to know that as parents and caregivers, you have the right to have access to your children's education. That is a right that you have as a parent and caregiver that the larger public does not have. You have a right to access your children's education records. You have a right to access transcripts. You have a right to access IEPs, individual education plans. You have a right to ask for just about any information related to your child that we hold in the Toronto District School Board. That is a right that you have as a parent and caregiver. You also have the right to enter our system and speak to any staff on any issue as it relates to your child. That's a right you have, right? And so I always want to be reminding parents that these are rights that you have the right to exercise, right? And I want to also bring a larger picture into this for parents, because sometimes parents and caregivers think that the education system is solely just about my school and what's happening in my school. And I always want to take this opportunity to say that the education system is really large. So when you look over on this side, where my mouse is moving, you want to see how large our education system is, because the Ministry of Education plays a real role, an important role in the education system in our school. They actually provide not just funding for our district, but they also provide the curriculum, what your kids learn, the way they should be learning it, right? And when they provide that curriculum, teachers then get it to then decide what is the best way that they can ensure that they teach it so students can learn it, right? I also want to introduce you to the Ontario College of Teachers, because this body is responsible for all teachers. They certify teachers, right? And that they have a central role in how teachers work, how teachers operate in our district. And I always want our parents and caregivers to know about this body. So just so that you know that there's a regulatory body, like an oversight body for all teachers in Ontario, that as parents and caregivers, you have access to. You can actually go and Google the Ontario College of Teachers, learn about what they do, learn about their role. And if you're interested, you can even go present to the Ontario College of Teachers. That's how open they are. And that here is just all of these school boards, because there's 72 of them in Ontario, of which Toronto District School Board is one. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say to you that a part of our education system are the number of unions that we have. And they also play a really important role overall in education, and that it's important that you be aware of them, because they do have a significant impact on how we operate. So, we have the Elementary Teachers Federation that supports all of our elementary teachers. We have our Secondary School Federation that supports our secondary teachers. We have a union that supports our principals. We have a union, CUPE, that supports our support workers. And so it's really important that you recognize that our system and what happens at your school is impacted by all of these key entities. And then I want to just flag the school councils, which I'll be speaking to, which happens at your local school, which happens within our district. On this side, you'll notice I did a really little chart for you where it's similar to what I spoke of before, that as parents and caregivers, right, you start with your teachers, then you can talk with your principals, then you can talk to your superintendents, then you can talk to the director, then you can talk to the Parent Involvement Advisory Committee, which is a central committee that speaks for parents to the trustees and provide recommendations to our Board of Trustees. And you can also talk to your trustee. And I always want to remind parents that every one of this group is open to you as a parent. There are no limitations here. And you have the right to access your teachers, your principals, your superintendent, associate director, the Parent Involvement Advisory, the trustees. These are all vehicles that you can access as a parent in ensuring that your child is getting what they need to effectively move through the education system and do so well. So just some quick points on your rights. So you have the right for information on your child. So I always say to parents and caregivers, you have the right to communicate with the teacher for the following key things. What is my child learning? How are they learning? How are they being assessed? And how can I support that learning at home? 3 things that parents have the right to ask your teacher. What is my child learning? How are they learning it? How are you assessing them? What does the assessment and an evaluation look like? And what is the best way I can support that learning at home? This is stuff that your teacher should be able to provide to you and give you that information so you can be able to stay connected and to be able to stay connected to the classroom, but also ensure that the learning that's happening in the classroom is something that you can support and nurture at home. This is one of my favorite sayings, right? That education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world, but we can't really use it as parents and caregivers until we actually engage in it, right? And so I encourage your engagement in terms of in the classroom where you're connecting with your teacher, you're communicating regularly, you're asking for information, you know how to connect and ask those questions, so you know the best ways to be supporting and nurturing your child around that. The other things I want to talk about as the opportunities for you to do that is through the school council. Every school in the Toronto District School Board is required to have a school council. If your school doesn't have one, as the parent, you could go ask your school principal, can we get a council started in our school if one doesn't exist? Because we're required by the Education Act to have a school council in every school, because school councils are the place where parents and caregivers get the opportunity, right, to engage with the school and engage with other parents and caregivers for the best interest of their children. And so it's really important that if you are not choosing to be a member of the council, that every now and then you attend a council meeting just to get a sense of what they're talking about. Or you can read or ask for the council minutes so you can get a sense of what is happening, because council meetings provide you with a lot of information as to what's happening in the school, what the principal may be doing, how it's happening. So I would encourage that you be a member of council, but if your life or time don't permit it, then I'd really encourage that you ask for the minutes so you can get a sense of what's happening. And if there isn't one happening in your school, then I'm going to say you have the right to ask your principal, why don't we have a council? And can we get a council started in our school? You heard earlier the discussion about the school improvement plan. One of the key things we're really focusing on this year is getting our parents, caregivers informed about the school improvement plan. And one of the things the board has asked our system to do, the Board of Trustees has asked our system to do, is ensure that we engage parents and caregivers into the school improvement planning process. And so what that means is we're being asked that principals should be providing information to you about the school improvement planning process. There should be something sent to you about the school improvement planning process that should at least tell you about what the school improvement planning process is, the ways in which you as a parent or caregiver can be a part of that school improvement planning process. And the other thing that principals are being asked to do is to actually talk to parents and caregivers about the data that they're gathering in their school. What do they know? What's happening in the school academically? How are you doing from an equity-based perspective in terms of those 4 areas, to be able to share that with parents and caregivers so they have a sense of what's happening. So I really would encourage you that if you've not heard about the SIP, I'm going to challenge you to step out. I'm going to challenge you to step out and say to your principal, you know, hey, I was in a meeting and I heard something about the school improvement planning process. Is that something you will be sharing with us soon? And is that something that you'll be having a meeting about? And if so, I'd love to get the information so I can participate. Because the school improvement process, as you learned earlier, is really an important process for the school because it highlights what the school will be focusing on. It sets clear goals around that, and it outlines the step the school is going to be taking to do that. And this year, we really want to see our parents and caregivers, particularly our parents who identify as racialized, to be engaging in that process. I also want to talk to you about responsibilities. I don't want to leave without flagging it because, you know, sometimes my colleagues say, Michelle, you talk to parents a lot about rights, but you don't balance it responsibilities. So I'm going to begin by the responsibilities that I believe parents and caregiver across our board, every one of them are already doing. And then I want to outline for you some of the responsibilities that have been outlined in the Education Act so you're aware. So, you know, I'm going to begin this by saying, I know that most of our parents across our board are already taking full responsibilities when they get their children up every morning, where they get them fed where they can, where they get them clothes, and they get them into our buildings on time. Many of our parents and caregivers are doing that across our system and are doing that despite what the challenges may be facing in their lives. that you're constantly sending us our best in the best ways that you can. And I know many of you take that responsibility seriously because you're getting your kids to us every day. And so I always want to begin this responsible conversation by always acknowledging that first. So here are some of the other things that the Education Act says that, parents, we need you to think about. Need you to think about that, that you're engaged in what's happening with your child in school so you can support the work at home. And this is not you doing homework for your kids, but you just doing the overview to be sure that they are engaging in it, that you're seeing growth at home. And if you're not, that you're able to call the teacher and say, that work you sent home, my child was struggling with it. Is there any help that you can offer? Is there any support that you can do so that they're doing better? So it's not you doing homework or schoolwork. It's more like you have a sense of what should be happening so you can create what I call an ambience of learning at home. So to ensure that you're overseeing that your child is getting that work done and that they're actually developing an understanding of it and that you can communicate back to the teacher what you're seeing at home. The other one is that you communicate regularly with the school, that your child comes to school properly dressed and prepared for school in light of the board's, code and school code of conduct, that you're ensuring that your child attends schools regularly and on time. And I'm going to speak to this briefly because the on time thing, what many parents don't know is that children who are constantly late for class, the research tells us that there's a significant loss of learning. Significant loss of learning that results in them sometimes not succeeding academically because they're constantly late. And that constant lateness, the 15, 20, 30 minutes, it begins to add up because when they're not in class for those 15, 20, 30 minutes that they're late, they're missing content. They're missing what was presented. And that content begins to build up, create frustration for the students. And before you know it, they're falling further and further behind. And so the idea about getting children in class on time can really have an impact on their achievement by one, ensuring that they're getting there, but also that they're getting to school on time because it impacts their academic achievement. Parents' responsibility, inform the school about your child's absence or lateness. That's through your school's arrival program. Become familiar with the code of conduct of the school. Encourage and help your children to understand what the rules and the guidelines are of the school to ensure that they're adhering to it. And help staff deal with any disciplinary issues or challenges that may involve your child. So these are some of the responsibilities that have been outlined, and I wanted to share those with you so you're actually aware of them. And I'm going to leave this quote with you, right? It is the most important, but in order for it to be the weapon, we actually have to engage in it. And I'm going to stop sharing there and open for any questions or comments that may be presented.
Michelle, thank you so much. But there's a question here. What if you are not given an opportunity to be a voice when you want to be a voice?
Then my question would be what were the opportunities? What was the response that came back to you? And are there ways that could be navigated? Right? Because depending on where you go, you may get a roadblock, right? But that doesn't mean you stop engaging. It just means that you find another way to navigate what was presented in front of you. And I dare say that may not be the easiest thing to do. And I can understand the frustrations that will create. But what I always gently remind us as parents and caregivers and guardians is that if we don't continue it, then we're leaving our children to sit in it, right? And so that if there's a roadblock that's presented in one area, so for example, if the roadblock is at the teacher's level, then you're going to find a way to shift it to the principal level. If the roadblock is at the principal level, then you find a way to shift it to the superintendent level, right? So it's always trying to figure out where that roadblock is and what the opportunities are for that you can navigate it.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. There are two questions that Carlo is going to answer for us at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just needed to scroll up to see the question. The question from one of our guests had asked, my child just started high school and had issues with a student last year, and it was documented in the files. It seems like it is starting again with the same student. Does the principal of the high school have access to the files from last year? Speaking from a principal's perspective, I think one of the things that I would ask of you is, if it is beginning to start up again, and you see that, one of the things that I would invite you to do is to speak with the school principal. The files that is often transferred from one school to the other is called the Ontario Student Record, and Ms. Monroe spoke about the family's right to be able to access the contents of that file. And there are pieces that can go in that file, specific pieces of information that is mandated by the Government of Ontario and the Ministry of Education. Files that a principal may have written may not have gone in the OSR. And so one of the things that I myself, even as a principal, counsel grade 6 parents as they go to grade 7, is I encourage them, take this proactive approach, an opportunity to speak with your principal to let them know the concerns that you have about your child. And in this particular case, I would also encourage you to connect with the school principal. You can say, as one of the things that I would advise other parents to say is inform the new principal that incidences like these took place last year, and that their former principal may be able to help and give context and give some of those strategies that were employed that worked, or possibly new strategies that may be put into place. I hope that helps. A second question that was asked, is there a way to put boundaries around emails sent to teachers? Many teachers I know spend hours outside of school hours replying to emails from parents, which doesn't seem reasonable. I think that it's important for us to, following Ms. Monroe, I think it is important for us to understand that every time a parent or a family member, a guardian communicates with their teacher, with a school, is an important moment, and is important to be able to just open up that opportunity for the home and school communication. And within the Toronto District School Board, a new policy has been developed. It is called the Disconnect from Work policy, and it does talk about inviting TDSB staff to think about their own wellness and their own mental health, especially as they prepare for the next day. It doesn't necessarily mean that the recipients of the emails won't respond. It just means that there is a reminder to teachers, to school principals, to think about your wellness as well. That being said, it doesn't mean that families and parents and guardians should stop communicating and engaging in that discussion or asking that question from their school leaders or their child's teacher. It just means that a response may not happen this evening. A response may happen tomorrow. And there are also many teachers, many school administrators who will take the time to respond, even at night, even when the policy is in play, depending on the question. So I would suggest that there are policy boundaries around disconnecting from work, but those does not necessarily mean that families should stop connecting with their children's principal or teachers, because those are important pieces of that home school home connection. Ms.
May I
Monroe?
also add quickly, Carlo, to that there are many educators in our system who post-COVID has learned that there are tools that they have available to them that could be easily used during the day to engage in this communication that may not require them to be doing it outside of school or classroom time. And I know that our IT department has been trying to share these tools with educators to say engaging your parents and caregivers doesn't have to be something you do on top of what you do. There are ways that it could be actually connected to the work that you're doing daily in the classroom. And so those are some opportunities that are presented to our teachers that may reduce the time or the need to be responding to every parent's request, where teachers could be doing some thinking about how am I in a proactive way keeping parents and caregivers informed of what's happening in the classroom space, thereby limiting the multiple questions that may come about what I'm doing.
Another question has come up around, I appreciate that the TDSB requests some religions that do not serve pork at school. However, the writer feels unseen and disrespected when they serve beef patties and beef hamburgers for example, on curriculum night. And one of the ways in which we can have this conversation with schools is to be able to bring, again, I'm a big fan of homeschool communication, to be able to raise this with the school principal, with the host of the particular event, and even beginning to ask, are there other options? Within the Toronto's District School Board's Equity Foundation statement, it talks about ensuring that all opportunities for accommodations, particularly food, are put into place, and that there are choice for families. And so if you see that there is an evening of sorts where food is being served and food has been identified, that may be a good opportunity and time to speak with your school council, speak with your school principal about what are the options available for families who may not be participating in the particular menu that has been provided.
Thank you, Carlo. Michelle, there's a question here for you. Do you think there is a good parent engagement in schools? And if not, what do you think is the reason?
You know what? I'm going to answer this one very honestly. Yes and no. Because there's some schools across our district where there's outstanding parent-caregiver engagement taking place. And let me describe what I mean by outstanding parent-caregiver engagement. One, that teachers across the school is actually reaching out and connecting and communicating. So where there's actually the home and the classroom are actually talking to each other, where teachers are sharing information on what's happening in the classroom with parents and caregivers are seeing the learning happening and they're connecting back into the classroom with the teacher. And there's a collaborative conversation happening about that student achievement and that student growth. And there are teachers who are genuinely interested in what parents think would be helpful in having that student learn. So, and the second piece for me, where councils are doing very active work, where all parents are not feeling welcome, but they feel a sense of belonging, because the council is engaged in activities where all parents and caregivers are feeling that they have an opportunity to step into spaces, have conversations about what they'd like to see happen, and then they're working collaboratively to happen. So, and I'm also seeing where the leadership of the school, the principal, is actually talking to staff about parent and caregiver engagement. It's at the center of the business of the school, and all stakeholders in that school, what I call the adults in that school, are on the same page around the importance of the value of what parents and caregivers bring to the conversation. And so it's happening in some of our schools, and it's happening in amazing ways. But is it happening in every one of our schools? No. And why is it not happening? Because not all schools are at the same place in one where all staff and parents feel comfortable in being able to have that conversation. There are places where there's some staff who are not yet comfortable connecting, and some parents who are not comfortable or who are not even sure if they're able to connect this way or if it's okay for them to do it. And, you know, so for the example earlier, is it okay for me to send a message to the teacher or ask a question? Is it okay for me to go to the principal and raise a concern? And sometimes, though, our school culture is not welcoming. Sometimes there's school couches where the parents enter it and they don't feel that they belong there, and that we've not done the work in our schools to ensure that when a parent or caregiver enter, whether virtually or in person, there's a welcoming and a sense of belonging that will want to continue engaging. There's some of our spaces where we're still working to create that. And until we do, many of our parents and caregivers may not want to engage. And I'll leave it at that, Donna.
Thank you, Michelle. 2 questions for Carlo. My daughter is between grade 4 to -5. If her skill is over that, what is your suggestion in order to upgrade her level and skill? Are there any programs between these grades? And another question is, why is my child having the same teacher 2 years in a row? Is this allowed in TDSB?
Thank you. Well, within Toronto District School Board, there are, I'll answer the second question. Within the Toronto District School Board, there are different sizes of schools. Some schools are staffed with 50 teachers, where I was at primarily, 50 adults where I was at primarily, and some schools are staffed with 15 adults, and it's highly dependent on school population. In schools where there are, where it is smaller, there is a higher likelihood where a student may be taught by a teacher more than once in their career. In a larger school, that likelihood is scaled back. There are also instances, depending on the program and depending on the class, that qualifications of the teachers play a role. For example, as a French teacher, as a health and phys ed teacher, as a teacher librarian, qualifications play a role in who is placed in that particular post in the classroom. And oftentimes a student will see the same gym teacher, the same librarian, the same French teacher over their careers in the school, changed only if that teacher were to move schools or that teacher were to request for a different position. The other question disappeared from the list.
Okay, I'm a student and I'd like to know, what would TDSB do if I were physically assaulted on school property?
The safety of every single student is paramount in the Toronto District School Board. And the student who wrote that, I am sorry that this happened. My best suggestion right now is tomorrow with your family member to be able to connect with the school, with your school principal, and to let them know that this happened. The school principal will be following a list of certain steps to be able to understand what happened and support you. And again, many different factors will be coming in to support you and to support the school in this situation.
And there's another question here. How do I best support my child with a learning disability, and they get upset because they find it so hard?
Thank you for that question. And one of the ways that, and Ms. Julian talked about it earlier, about the notion of helping your children, around their mental health and well-being by speaking to them, asking them exactly what it is that they are finding difficult, what it is that they are finding challenging in the school. I would suggest to the family member that they also have an opportunity to speak with their school principal or their child's teacher, to be able to share with them that specific piece that the child has shared, that they're finding some of the work difficult, they're finding some of the work hard. And the more the teacher is aware of these different perspectives, and in collaboration with the school principal, there are many things that can be put into place to support the child. There are processes within the school to receive support through special education. There are resources at school for reading. There are after school programs that can also support if those are available in your schools. But I would suggest to the parent, to the family member who raised the question, that connecting with the principal and the teacher, pardon me, and letting the teacher know what exactly the child has said, because it's important as for the teacher to be able to hear that and begin to work with you in thinking about what could those supports look like for them in the classroom.
Carlo, can you answer the question, when is online classes starting?
Online classes have started at the same time as the school year started. Now, the only caveat that I'm going to say to that is, if we have just started, we are just finished reorganization, and reorganization in schools is when a new number of teachers have been allotted to the school because of the change in school numbers or reduced. And if the student who asked the question or the family member who asked the question is one of those where they had transferred, that may be something that they can ask the school principals about. But generally speaking, online classes have started for the families who requested them.
So at this time, if we have any questions, please feel free to send it to myself, Donna Cardoza, donna.cardoza@tdsb.on.ca, and I will make sure your question is answered and send the reply to you. But I'd like to take a minute to say thank you to parents, caregivers, educators, senior staff, the Office of PCEO, social work, our centrally assigned principal, and most important, parents and caregivers and students that joined us this evening to do the land acknowledgement, the African libation statement, for being here to share with us. Your questions were so valuable. It informs our work. It tells us what we need to do more of to reach our parents, to serve our parents and caregivers. So thank you so much for being with us this evening. And this recording can be found on PCEO YouTube channel. There are so many YouTube videos on that, all informing of the many services, the many ways you can learn to advocate and navigate the system for the best education for your child to achieve beyond their dreams, beyond their potential. So thank you so much for joining us. The Parents as Partners Conference is coming up on the 22nd and the 23rd of October. Please check out the website. They have amazing presentations. It's in the chat. Please check out the hub, TDSB hub. Again, that has a wealth of information. And on November 2nd, there's another brilliant presentation for parents and caregivers of students with a special education needs. So please join us for that on November the 2nd. And again, thank you for being a part of a wonderful, amazing TDSB team. Have a great evening. And for those celebrating Thanksgiving, I wish you a happy Thanksgiving. And thank you for making this journey one where we continue to learn and share.